All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Super happy to have you here today. We have an exciting discussion lined up, all based around the State of Web Development Survey. Joining me right now is Akia Obas. Akia, hello.
Hey, how's it going, Sterling? So great to be here.
Oh, I'm so glad that you are here, and I'm doing pretty good. How are you doing today?
I'm good. It's a little cold in Boston, but keep 'em warm.
Yeah. Glad you're keeping warm, and we just got hit with a bunch of snow out here in Utah, so I think it's just winter wonderland all around.
Sometimes
Um,
go this way.
yeah. To kind of outline the agenda for everyone tuning in, this webinar will be in two parts. First, we have the amazing Akia joining us, and then in a little while we will have Matt Kane joining us to talk about not only the survey and how all the data came together to tell the story that you've seen. And if you haven't seen the story yet, jump over to netlify.com. In the eyebrow, you'll see the link for the State of the Web Development Survey. Download it, read it, check it out, and let us know if you have any questions. Before we dive into things, Akia, would you mind giving a brief introduction of yourself?
Sure. So I've been at Netlify almost 2 years, and I lead the amazing data and insights team here at Netlify. So we own all of the data and get to do a great job in terms of analyzing and sharing those insights with not only the Netlify community, but the rest of the community here in web development space.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And I forgot to introduce myself. Everyone, I'm Sterling Davis, product marketing here at Netlify, and super happy to be here and have this conversation today. Diving right in, Akia, we just wrapped up the Netlify State of Web Development Survey. It was a pretty fun project, a pretty big project in terms of data analysis, outreach, all of the above. Just out of curiosity, so that folks know, how many developers participated in the survey this year?
Awesome. So the survey closed out in actually last year of 2023, and we had around 6,400 or so respondents. When we look at that sample size year over year, statistically flat. I think last year was around 6,500. So a lot of respondents, a lot of data for us to dig into, which is exciting.
Definitely. And appreciate the clarification on the survey respondents responded last year. I'm still adjusting to 2024. It'll take me a little bit. So thank you for that. One of the things that a lot of folks would love to know that I think that, I mean, who better than you to explain the methods and how we came to analyze this data. So out of curiosity, what methods did we use to recruit such a large and diverse pool of developers to take the survey?
Great question. How did we find these people? How did we get folks to answer this survey? So we leverage SurveyMonkey, and they do their best effort in terms of provisions to ensure that we don't have duplicate entries. But in terms of how we distribute the survey link, we are emailing Netlify customers. We have the survey linked to Netlify operated sites, to our social media, and so forth. But that being said, our survey in general, it is highly representative of current Netlify users. And we're thinking about ways as we go into this year and start to design the survey, thinking about ways to solve for that, right? To address the concern that a lot of the folks that are taking the survey are current users of Netlify's platform.
Definitely. Yeah, I appreciate that. And in terms of the responses, right? There's the question all around, well, how does the analytics team ensure that these responses are both anonymous and unbiased? So in this collection of data, we utilize different channels for outreach, right? We wanted as many developers as possible to jump in and to take the survey and to be engaged with the promise that we were going to share this data and this information. As a developer, there's a ton of benefit here, right? Because they get to look at not only what their peers across industries are building and what they're building with, but they can add their voice to that. They could add their voice about the satisfaction with current tools, and they have the opportunity to remain anonymous, and they expect these unbiased responses, right? So curious from you, what steps were taken to make sure that the respondents were truly anonymous and that the data that was analyzed was unbiased?
Yeah, great. So I'll answer the first question. We're not asking people's age or race or things of that nature, and we want to be respectful, and we don't use any of that data or ask those particular questions. But I think we all know one of the biggest challenges with surveys. Surveys are fantastic, right? It's a great way to collect data to get a pulse on any topic, like the state of web development. But one of the biggest challenges with surveys is, there are going to be potential areas where you can be biased. One of the challenges with surveys in general is survey fatigue with boredom, right? People will just check off answers just to get to the end. And we really want to be mindful of that. And we try to solve for that by keeping our survey short. It's 27 questions. It was 27 questions in 2023. It was 27 questions the year prior to that. So it only takes roughly 10, 11-ish minutes to finish. We also allow respondents to skip questions, right? So, if there's a question that doesn't, align with, the respondent's experience, they are able to skip those questions. Another challenge overall with surveys and surveys design is that sometimes you can design a survey question where it can be leading, where it can be kind of phrased weirdly or too complex. And we really try to solve for that. We keep our questions simple. For example, one of the questions that we ask in the survey is, thinking of the last 12 months, have you used the following services and will you continue to use them? Really straightforward. And then we give the list of vendors to that question. So we really want to make sure that the survey is simple. We are Netlify, right? Keeping it simple and straight to the point, but also making sure that the questions aren't too complex. However, despite all of our best efforts, there will be some sources of error. It's a self-selected survey, right? So in general, people that answer the survey are probably enthusiastic about sharing their opinions about developer tools and trends and the latest and greatest technology. So that's one thing to keep in mind. It's going to be biased towards that. And we don't, as I mentioned earlier, we're not collecting any information around age, race, or gender. Therefore, we can't weight, our data if there's one demographic that is more prevalent than the other. So we really try to do a good job in terms of ensuring that we're controlling for any bias in the way our survey is designed.
Fantastic. I appreciate the thorough response. That's great. In terms of the process, different quality checks that we put in place as we are approaching this data. What results from a survey is a whole bunch of this raw data, right? And then there's going to be various quality checks throughout the process to cleanse that raw data before analysis, to basically get it into the point where it's ready to really begin telling the story. Would you mind walking through the process of what that looks like in terms of what checks are there along the way? And before we analyze the data, what does that process of cleansing the raw data look like?
That's a great question. So we don't do much cleaning of the actual data that comes from the survey, meaning we're not throwing out responses. So we're not just cherry picking the responses that we like. We keep all that data. We also, in terms of understanding if the survey was programmed correctly, right? Did we set it up in the system correctly? Is it triggering the questions in the sequence that we want? We're looking at the count of responses, right? Does that number drop as we go through the questions, the frequency of those responses, and kind of connected to my answer previously in terms of we don't have any, you're allowed to skip questions if you're a survey respondent taking the state of web development survey, where we really want to look at the percentage of blanks, right? That's probably one of our biggest quality checks that we're doing. We don't want to see someone just answering the first question and, they kind of fall off. That means there's a flaw to our survey design. So that's probably one of the biggest quality checks that we do.
Definitely. I appreciate that. And diving a little deep on that in terms of the analysis and taking the different basically segmenting survey respondents in the analysis, whether it's by demographics, whether it's by stack, whether it is any number of combination that we could look at in terms of filtering the data and organizing it and trying to understand the different pieces. I'm curious, are there any clear differences that emerge between these segments?
That's a great question. One of the most commonly used segmentation analysis that we do with our survey results is job role. It's one of the first questions that we ask. And while developers, continue to be the most common job category, whether it's front end or back end or full stack, we did see some differences emerge when looking at executives versus developers. That was one of the areas that we really leaned into this past year to understand, well, how are executives, right? The folks that in some cases are the ones purchasing the technology, that have the purchasing power. How are they feeling about the state of web development? And we did see some differences in terms of how executives understand the barriers into going composable, or they understand the positive aspects of going composable. So, for example, one of the questions we asked are, what barriers have prevented you from switching to composable sites? And interestingly, 55% of executives said they were unsure on where to start, right? So that points to maybe the knowledge gap there, skills gap there, just not understanding what are the sequential steps that they need to take as a leader in their organization to move to the composable web. And when we looked at developers and their responses to that same question, only 44%. So the job role, is one of the main segmentation analysis that we performed to see, for the folks that are doing the work, how do they feel about going composable compared to the folks that potentially are making the decision for the company to go composable.
That makes a lot of sense. And with these various personas, if you will, executives versus developers, there were some really fun questions that were asked, right? One of which that comes to mind was, well, where do you turn for information, right? Do you go to YouTube? Do you go to Stack Overflow? And it was really interesting seeing the breakdown and the differences for executives versus developer of where they turn for this information, right? Developers, YouTube, and Stack Overflow, right? And I think that if we would have been able to revise the question with the rapid growth of ChatGPT, for example, then that would have been a really neat one to add in terms of where you turn for information. How many times are we asking questions to something like ChatGPT? And even the responses to that type of technology, ML AI, generative AI, what the concerns were, like you said, differences between people who are kind of driving at the executive level versus the developers who are focused in the work and executing, which is exactly what you would hope to see. Different viewpoints based off of their roles and responsibilities and what they're looking at for the data. One of the questions that I think that we can jump in on together that we were asked is, well, with this survey, because you and I were able to work closely on this project together, which was a lot of fun, really enjoyed it. The team was fantastic, and it was super exciting to come together, right? And to see the story that began to emerge, especially with some of these emerging technologies and some of these trends around composable, visual editing, MLAI, all of the above. One of the questions is, well, which type of questions tend to have the most variability or uncertainty in responses, right? And why do we think that is? So if I were to take an initial swing at that, I would say that it's really interesting when you're judging and when you're trying to capture somebody's sentiment about a product, a technology, or a service that they're using. Everybody will have a different skill, right? Mm-hmm. So one of the things that we did when we approached the data is we said, well, are you familiar with this? And then based off of a yes or no, we were able to rank familiarity not only with a certain product or a framework or a CMS, but with the technology as a whole. So we can then gauge, well, how familiar are you with this? Not only that, but you hit on this earlier, but we asked very specifically if you have used that technology in the last 12 months on any of your projects, which is great because then you could determine usage. Oh, I've used this. Yes. And then a follow-on on that was, well, based off of using it in the last 12 months, would you say that you don't want to use it anymore, that you have no desire to use it anymore? Or would you say on the opposite end, the extreme end, yes, I used it, I love it, I want to use it more, and then there's the answers in the middle, right? So I would answer that and I would say, well, in terms of the variability or uncertainty in responses, year over year, because we've been doing a community survey for a couple of years now, we've seen different trends. We've seen where usage and satisfaction are a key predictor in growth for the next year. Right? Mm-hmm. But as we engage with these developers and the people who are using the technology, if usage is either increasing or if it remains flat, but then sentiment or satisfaction decreases, then that could be an indicator that the next year we might not get the same usage, right? There might be a declining usage and declining sentiment. So I thought that was a fantastic question. And I thought that I would share how I would answer that and to kind of explain it a little bit, but I would love your take on that as well. What types of questions do you think had the greatest uncertainty in responses, and how did we account for that and take that into consideration when asking those questions?
Yeah, great. Just to add to that, I think the qualifying questions were key, right? Making sure that the respondent has used the technology, is familiar with the technology before asking them to rate how often are they using it and are they satisfied with that. I think that really does ground the analysis in some set of truth. I think the thing that surprised me the most was around ML and AI. It's such a hot topic in the industry. I mean, everyone is talking about it, not in web development, but in every industry out there. And just the amount of usage of ML and AI and the high satisfaction, I think really surprised me. As a data person, we're typically skeptics of sometimes the shiny new toy. And so I was assuming that the satisfaction of some of these early age ML and AI tools would be lower. And so I think that's one of the things that really just shocked me, was that not only are people using it in their day-to-day, but they're happy with what they're using. Right? I think that just goes to show that we have, even more opportunities in that space in the short term.
Absolutely. Echoing what you said there, I think it was something like, and I should pull this up to make sure, but it was almost 90% of people were like, yeah, I'm aware of that technology, like in terms of using generative AI with MLAI, which, to your point, holy smokes, this is the first time we've asked about it. ChatGPT was released November of 2022, right? So this survey, within 8 or 9 months, almost anybody who had touched a web project, a digital project, said, yeah, we've used that,
Yeah.
which is incredible. It's almost unprecedented. It's unheard of.
Agreed.
Yeah. And the last one was, well, with all of these findings, there's a lot of answers that might surprise us. They might be expected. In terms of the survey analysis, how do we determine which findings are the most important to emphasize in public reporting? And I could take a swing at this one as well. So this was part of the story that I got to jump in with the data team and really help tell the story in terms of what are we seeing? What are some of these trends? What is super exciting? What is probably going to be heard a lot more in the coming year? Because this survey is really designed to not only empower and to empower developers with knowledge of different tools and what other folks are using and trending technologies, but also to inform their web strategies moving forward. So this is really fun because there are some hot topics in the industry, just like you mentioned, MLAI all over the place right now, right? And there's also composable. Why would an enterprise or a company want to move their stacks into composable architectures? Not only that, but what are the key things that they are looking at in terms of their concerns? What are they concerned about? That's a big move, right? Shifting methodology from operating around a monolith, which everything was baked into a single stack, basically, to moving to composable, where you can pick and choose every single part or aspect of your stack and really create something that is custom designed for you and your company to realize tremendous success across the board. So for me, it was the story of what are the trends that are occurring right now. Not only that, but in terms of CMSs and frameworks, what are developers really wanting to know, right? What do they get excited about? What would be really interesting? In one case, Astro, right? Amazing in terms of year over year growth and satisfaction. The fact that it was outpacing so many frameworks, and again, we're not biased here. We're very unbiased with the results, but that was a story that we wanted to be able to share. And I think for a product like that is so community led and developer focused and oriented, that was the right story to tell, right? So I'm curious, in your perspective, how does that complement the data and the story of what we decide to choose and share in terms of maybe what the headline is, what are the key topics, what is the story? I would love your thoughts on that as well.
Yeah. Just to add to that, I think, we ask about satisfaction with a lot of the vendors and services that web developers are leveraging, and looking at those trends in terms of what has shifted year over year. Those are usually, the things that we want to make sure that we highlight in our reports. But the other thing is we also want to make sure that we're in tune with what's going on in the economy, right? Like,
Yes.
2023 felt a lot different than 2020 and 2019 in terms of the state of the economy. And so one of the topics that we really wanted to highlight is how what's going on in the economy and how these, executives are feeling about the economy, and how that relates to the benefits of going composable, right? And how those are connected, and how going composable can help save you time, can, allow you to maybe have a smaller team, can maybe solve for the skills gap there. And so that is another thing that we want to make sure is like, kind of lift our head up from the computer, what's going on around us, and how do some of the trends that we're seeing in the data either solve for the challenges in our current economy and how executives are feeling or not. And so that was another topic that we wanted to make sure that we highlighted.
Absolutely. Yes. That so important. greater economical factors, aligning your digital strategy with current market conditions, and making sure that efficiency and productivity is achieved at every level, regardless of budget, regardless of circumstance, with the overall goal of aligning your digital your digital strategy to your business goals, and making sure that you're informed and aware of all of these factors coming together and what would create the best solution to build and boost your business revenue.
Yep, absolutely. Perfectly said, Sterling.
Thank you. Akia, it has been an absolute pleasure. I cannot thank you enough for your insight and for sharing your thoughts with us. This has been a lot of fun. I really appreciate your time.
Awesome. Well, thank you for having me, Sterling. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, moving right along with the conversation. We're super excited to have Matt Kane here. Matt, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Really good to see you.
Good to see you as well. For those who are tuning in, would you mind giving a brief introduction of yourself?
Sure. So I'm Matt Kane. I'm one of the principal engineers here at Netlify. I'm mostly working on frameworks where my job is to make sure that all of the web frameworks deploy brilliantly on Netlify. I also do quite a bit of work with the community. I contribute to lots of open source projects, including most of the frameworks that you've used and a few that you haven't. And I also maintain some open source projects of my own. So my most popular one is Unpick, which is a image component library. So basically I'm all web framework. I love them all in different ways. They're like, I cannot pick my favorites out of them, but, there have been a lot that each has their pros and cons. So I'm really looking forward to having a conversation about web frameworks today because it's one of my favorite topics.
Love it. Love hearing that. And the state of web development, the report this year, there was a couple of, really big movers in the world of frameworks, right? Some of the data, really exciting to a lot of people. Some of it might have been surprising, but I think that we'd like to dive in and kind of double down on a couple of those topics with you.
Looking forward to it. That's great. I mean, it's a very interesting survey every year. So it's always something that I look forward to getting our little sneak preview beforehand. I think there's always a few things that come out of it that are particularly interesting and surprising. And I think this year we've got some particularly good ones that I know that a lot of people are very interested in talking about.
Definitely. And one of those topics is Astro, right? Astro, in terms of who we identified as a leader in, and this is changes from 2022 to 2023. In both usage and satisfaction, Astro emerged as the leader in terms of frameworks that we surveyed developers around the world about. I'm curious, have you used Astro in any of your projects recently? And if so, what has been your experience compared to past or other frameworks? What really stands out about Astro that you like?
Yeah, so this is a really interesting result. So, this is one of the things that people might not realize with these sort of questions, where we're looking at the balance between popularity and satisfaction, is they are usually inversely correlated. So, the first people that use them, the early adopters, the ones who love them. And then as it becomes more popular, it includes more people who are maybe not so keen to be working with it. So you generally see that as a framework becomes bigger and more widely used, that the popularity goes down a little bit. And, that's kind of one of the common things. And there are, these are things where, so when you see something that is increasing both in popularity and in satisfaction, then that something is really interesting happening there. And that's been, some of the frameworks that you would like that are the biggest buzz have been like that. So, Next.js has previously been that for many years, has been one that is managing to maintain both. So this is one of the interesting things with Astro is that, it in absolute numbers, it's still not anywhere near the top at the moment. But in terms of the momentum and in terms of the direction that it's moving, it is dramatic. And it's very easy to say, well, why do you think this is? Because, you can say this, it's because it's great. But that doesn't always mean that something is popular if it's great. And, let's get this here first. I think Astro is great. I'm a big fan. I've used it quite a lot in the last year for various projects. And it's really good. And it's really, it's really enjoyable to work with. But I think that one of that's not the whole story when it comes to why Astro is seeing this growth in satisfaction and usage. And there are a few things behind that. And, this is from my conversations in the community and watching what people are talking about there. And I think there are a few things that make Astro something that more people are wanting to use, and that the people who are using it are really enjoying it. And I think the first one of those is that it is not trying to do everything from the beginning. It started out doing certain things very well. So when it was smaller, it was mostly focused on statically generated sites, but then it added support for SSR and for more rendering modes and so on as it went on. And that was its way of expanding the things that it can be used for. So one of the sites that I first built with it, like about a year ago now, was the docs site for I mentioned my open source framework.
Yeah.
I built the docs site for that. Now, Astro is fantastic for a docs site, and is even better now than it was then, because they have Starlight, which is the docs theme for Astro, which is fantastic. I mean, it's one of the best out there, along with things like Docosaurus as well. And it's a really good choice. But they've now taken it beyond that sort of kind of static thing and put it in there that you can be building entire apps based on it. And I think that this is where they are doing it in a very thoughtful way. So they are building this in a thing that is very, very coherent. It's not that they're trying to throw everything together and then realizing that they need to, add another API on top of the old one and all this kind of thing to get the approach of supporting all of these use cases. They are taking it slow. They are making each feature fantastic, and then before moving on to the next one. And I think that this is the key there. They are building this in a very thoughtful way. And it's one of the things that has been most impressive for me about working with Astro, is just how much thought has clearly gone into the API designs for this thing. So this is the way that they are managing to expand the usage so well.
Yeah, and I agree wholeheartedly, and that approach is working. And I think that there's a lot of value to be added in a very thoughtful approach, where, like you said, each of the features are made fantastic. There's not a huge rush to get everything included right now and out the door, but thoughtfully and methodically approaching each of these different features and having developers involved every step of the way, as they are the ones who are on the front lines and using the product and using the framework and building with it. One of the other things that you hit on, and I think that it's a fantastic opportunity to clarify, is yes, in terms of overall usage, we did see that Next.js had the most usage, right? And that's spot on. But the interesting thing that we like to try to capture is the change year over year, that the amount of growth paired with the overall satisfaction. And you hit on this as well, but this is such a key predictor of who is going to continue rapid growth into the next year. One of the more interesting things about looking at the history of this survey is that if there's declining satisfaction and an increase in usage, then you'll almost anticipate a slightly smaller increase in usage in the next year, right? But if you have that combination of increased usage and increased satisfaction, then that's a key predictor. And that's why Astro, I think, was did so well on the survey. Is, to your point, it's very thoughtfully built for developers at any stage of a project. And now full applications, full sites you could build using the framework, which is super powerful. Another thing that you mentioned is the developer community with Astro. Astro has a fantastic developer community, right?
Absolutely. I mean, it's a really welcoming community, but it's a very helpful one. And I think this is one of the things that can lead to declining satisfaction in a framework is, that moment that you get frustrated that you can't get something working, and you either can't find you can't get it working in the docs or something like that, and then you drop into Discord or you go onto Stack Overflow or Twitter or whatever, and you start asking, and you get people being snarky with you or something like that. Astro is very much not like that, and it comes all the way from the top. The company, the leadership, and everything. They're very open, and the community is very welcoming to new users. And I think that it's really, it's paying off in dividends. You can see the way that people are, cheerleaders for it. And, that's not to say that there are people, every framework has got its cheerleaders, but I think this is,
Absolutely.
it's more that you don't even, you don't need to be this true believer to be able to be welcomed into the community. And I think that's, you can see that in the approach for example, the fact that in Astro you can choose your own front end framework for it. And I think it's this welcoming approach of making it, easy to get in, but also not too prescriptive about what you want to use to build your sites and your apps. So I think that it's quite a contrast for some of the very prescriptive ways that some of these frameworks go, and they are, this is the way that you are going to build things. And if you're doing it in a different way, then you are building wrong. You're building things wrong for the web or something like that. So this is definitely not the approach that we see from Astro.
Agreed. And I love that. And I think that, in terms of, if you haven't read for anybody tuning in, if you haven't seen the full survey yet, head over to netlify.com, find the latest state of web dev survey, download it, and check out the section on Astro where we talk about and break down some of these ideas of what is making Astro so appealing to developers. And I think, to summarize what we've said here about Astro, it's very thoughtful. They have fantastic docs, a really great community behind it, and flexibility. Like you said, it's very welcoming, not only with your preferred technology, but as a community as a whole, very, very helpful and very supportive of all things that you're looking to build and to get the help to do it. One of the things that we asked about in the survey, Matt, that I would love your insight on, we asked after MLAI, right? Not only some of the top use cases, but some of the concerns, and how this technology in so many ways is reshaping the world of web development as we know it. It's really mind-boggling to think that OpenAI released to the public, I believe it was November of 2022, right?
Yes, that was, I think, an original release of ChatGPT was around then. So it's barely been over a year. It seems amazing what has happened in that amount of time.
It really does. And the platform growth has been absolutely incredible, and so many people are turning to generative AI tools, not only to assist in content, but also in web development, right? One of the things that we asked developers about is, well, what are your top concerns with using a tool that an AI tool, if you will, right, to assist in web development projects. And 47% said that they're actually worried about a decrease in code quality. I'm curious what tools you've used to assist you and what you enjoy using. And in terms of personal projects or even work projects, that's fine too. And the capabilities of these tools and how they can lend to a web developer and the various tasks that you manage throughout a day.
So I think that this is very interesting. There's kind of two sides to this generative AI revolution, I suppose. It's not a, I don't think it's hyperbolic to call it that. And I'm very much a big fan of using these tools day to day. I was in the Copilot beta from the very beginning when because of being an open source contributor, I got the freebie access quite early on, and I've taken to relying on it now. To me, it's like it's as much a part of my workflow as IntelliSense and autocomplete. I think the way to think of these kind of things is that you need to use them as a tool, and you're not, you can't rely, need to know which things you can trust them for and which things you can't. And, I'm not going to assume that if I'm doing an autocomplete that's going to be correct. I'm going to check things. And the same goes for my for my Copilot autocompletes and so on. So it's something that quality is a genuine concern that you need to look at. But I think that we as software engineers have got it easier than a lot of people when it comes to these kind of things, because with our code, we should be checking it anyway. I don't want to be flippant about it, but we need to be testing these things. And whether the code is written by me, whether the code is written by one of my colleagues, a junior who I'm pairing with, or, a senior who I'm pairing with, or if it's written by Copilot or Bing Chat or Claude or whatever, it's something that needs to be checked. And we are able to check our code. I'm not going to be complacent and say that it's perfect, but it's a lot easier for us to check the correctness of our code than it is to fact check a academic paper. So I think that we need to not be complacent. We need to make sure that we stick with, but the tools we are using should be the tools that we are using anyway. Our unit tests, our integration tests, our end-to-end tests, and, PR reviews and all of those kind of things. And I think we are not going to be shipping everything, AI-generated code directly to production for, we can use that for prototypes, we can use that for proofs of concept and that kind of thing. But we need to treat this with the same kind of scrutiny that we would treat any code. And I think as long as you have got a workflow that has that kind of level of code review, then I think you're okay, and it's a valuable tool to have. And I think, in terms of the things that I've been using it for, Copilot is something I use every day or, constantly and it's mostly for little snippets of boilerplate. That's basically the main thing that I'm using it for. But I think interesting thing that I've done on the side is a few months, over the last month or so, I've decided I wanted to do something a bit different from outside the web stuff. And I've been working on learning Kotlin and doing some Android development. Now, I'd not used Kotlin before, and I'd not used Jetpack Compose before, and it was an entirely new thing for me. And I used ChatGPT as a tutor, and I asked it, help me learn these things, give me a syllabus of things to work through, grade my code, and then it was fantastic for that. It was a really useful thing to be able to have this thing to bounce ideas off. And I'm not going to beat around the bush. It did lie quite a bit, and it gave hallucinating, I think is the correct term for this. But at the same time, it was able to really be very helpful. And it was really easy for me for things like working out what best practices were. I was like, is this idiomatic? This is something that this particular, code structure or whatever, it seems a bit odd. Is this idiomatic, Colin? And they will say, yes, this is what you're doing. Or actually, no, this is not something that's usually done. And, that kind of thing is brilliant. But at the same time, I'm still not going to be shipping that stuff directly to production. This is stuff that I'm using as a way of learning. And I think that's the kind of thing that I just sort of treat it as maybe a slightly gullible colleague, a junior that is happens to be the most gullible person in the world who, not the sort of person that you would normally necessarily want to hire, but has also got extreme knowledge of absolutely everything. So I think as long as you know how to treat it, then it can be a very useful tool.
There was a lot of really, really valuable things that you had in there. I took a few notes because I really liked a handful of those. I agree. Rapid prototyping, proof of concept, what a fantastic way to hit the ground running, right? And to at least begin a few steps ahead, so that at that point, the tuning and the review, as you said, you still have to review, right? There's no way around that. The review should be a very intricate part of web development processes across the board. And I also think, and I'm curious your thoughts on this as well, I think a lot of, and yes, there's wrong answers can come, and they will come, right? But I also think that so many of us are still learning the proper way to prompt engineering, if you will, right? To ask the right question, and without the right question, we won't get the right answer, right? So I'm curious your thoughts on what is, in terms of structuring the best prompt possible to get the best answer. Is there any quick tips or pieces of advice that you have there?
I think that one of my favorite things to do, and I know that a lot of people have worked this one out, is if you're using Copilot, if you treat Copilot as a colleague who needs to understand your code, then you will, if you start writing comments in your code and you write them well, and you write them in the same way that it's going to be understood by one of your co-workers, the Copilot is pretty good at then taking that and running with it. And that's a good way of thinking about it. And I think that some of those kind of ways of thinking that you can, you don't want to necessarily overthink the way that you structure these things. And you think, if you write these things down and express them in a way that is clear, then that's going to help a lot. But with things like ChatGPT, I'm a big fan of using custom instructions in there. So my custom instructions have a bit of background about who I am and what sort of level they should pitch things at me. But it also, I make a big thing in about saying, it's okay to not know the answer. If you don't know the answer, tell me, or you can look things up. And I think that this is one of the things that is I think one of the outcomes of the way that the reinforcement learning has worked for these language models is that they are penalized for not knowing the right answer, because when people are giving human feedback, they mark things down if it says no, I don't know, and they don't necessarily spend the time to fact check them. So they are reinforced to kind of BS things a bit, shall we say, and it's kind of they need to be told that it's okay to not know. It's like anything, anybody, you need to learn that it's okay to ask a question. It's fine to ask a question. It's fine to say you don't know. So, let's mentor our language models and tell them that it's okay to not know the answer and that they can Google it or Bing it rather. So I think that the need for the view that it's kind of like, be sure, be confident when you're confident. And if you don't know, that's fine. Please tell me. I'd much rather you tell me that you don't know than you make something up. And that applies both to language models and to my children and to my workers and everything. So, yeah.
I love that. Thank you so much. Last question. In terms of looking ahead towards the future, as a developer, how helpful do you find reports like this, the state of web development, in terms of shaping not only your perception and perspective of what is happening in such a in a landscape that is evolving so rapidly, right? And how does it impact the time that you choose to spend learning new things? I'm curious your thoughts there. How helpful reports like these are to a developer in terms of shaping their future strategies?
I mean, for me personally, it's totally invaluable. But obviously, as part of that is because I work with all of the frameworks, so not everybody's going to be in the same position. However, the thing that it is useful for should be useful for anybody who's making these technology decisions, particularly looking at the satisfaction things. I mean, we all have constraints over what technologies we can choose. We have, there are business reasons for choosing particular things and so on, but all things being equal, I would much rather work with a technology that people like than work with one that people are frustrated by. And I think that if you're going to look at for choosing the things that you're going to be learning, I like to see which things that people are happy working with, because life's too short to learn stuff that is unpleasant to learn unless you
Agreed.
Absolutely have to. At which point you don't need to be looking at the report if you're, as everybody has said, I'm really sorry, but you've got to write this whole thing in whatever language that I'm not gonna drop at the moment. But I think it's a case of being able to see where these things are moving rather than necessarily the way that they are in absolute terms that is most valuable. So I think that this is one of the great things about this particular report, is that we do have many years of data here, so we can see the way that these things are moving. And I think because some of it's one of these things where it's like the bits that are obvious are not so interesting. I mean, Next.js is the most popular, and it's popular for a reason, because it's incredibly powerful and it's able to do amazing things, and it's got an ecosystem like no other. But it's about seeing, you don't need a report to tell you that. We know that already, and I think it's about, the reports are the interesting ones about to find the unexpected things in there. And so this is what I like to do, is I like to see what is growing and what people love. And I think that is the one of the things that this is best for me, is just seeing what are these things that I might not have heard of. Obviously I want to be at the, like so many of us, we want to just know all the new shiny things and try them out. But if I am going to devote my time into learning something that I don't necessarily have to learn, I want to do that, as a developer, my productivity is going to be better if I'm working with something that people like working with. So that's one of the key things that I like to use it for.
Super helpful. Matt, thank you so much for your time and for sharing your wisdom. Really appreciate your insights and really appreciate everything in terms of your thoughtful responses and assisting us in this journey of learning more about the state of web development, some of these technologies, and looking forward how to utilize a report like this to help our decision-making process in the future. So thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me and letting me talk about web in general and frameworks and everything, because there's it's some of my favorite things to talk about. So thanks for having me on.
Thank you so much. All right.